Psych, I went to the wrong place. Hi, everybody. You're probably expecting to see Mr. Jam, and you will get him in just a minute. I'm actually going to go sit on the couch. He's going to take fully over. Cannot wait. Please be nice. Please be kind. You guys always are. But let me say hello to everybody. Hi, Mia. Hi, Piglet. Hi, Varda, Mindy, Kelly. How are you guys all doing? Hi, Lainey. Hi, Zach. National Popcorn Lovers Day. I mean, okay. Hi, Towels. How are you? Nice to see you. Hi, Mishu. Hi, Boo. Ladybug. Welcome in, guys. How are you doing? Let's see. Where was I? Stream Elements threw me off my game. Hi, Carolyn. Welcome in. Welcome in, guys. Varda, I don't know if I said hi to you, but hello. Nice to see you. I am going to turn you over to Mr. Jam, who is going to get started. You know what? I will take my pom-poms with me, and I'll wave them from the couch if anything exciting happens. Am I going to be playing Pokopia while he talks to you? Maybe. But I will be here. I know you're in good hands, though. So let me turn you over to the professor, and I'll see you soon for DDV.
The power I feel right now. No. Hello, everybody. This is the very, 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 very first stream I have ever run. So this is going to be an interesting experience. But thank you very much. It's good to see all of you. I'm going to keep looking to each side because I'm not used to looking at the camera.
Can they see me from here?
Yeah. Oh, they can see you all right. See? Yep. There go the pom-poms. So hello. You all chose the topic for today, which was why everything is Queen Victoria's fault. Obviously not everything. That's a little misleading. But Victoria and the decisions her government made wildly affected how we live today. Oh, Mishu, thank you. I'm lucky to have such a nice audience. Maybe you guys can come in and teach my undergraduates a thing or two when we're finished. And obviously there's a whole bunch of things that, the Victorian age, when you hear the name, pop into your head and associations we make. This, however, is the woman herself. This is, Mindy waved back to you, by the way. But, in some ways, a vast majority of the things in our world today are actually Queen Victoria's fault, either directly or indirectly. So I thought we'd start talking about the Queen herself. So Victoria came to the throne very, very, very young. Granted, she was of age, but she did not succeed her father. She actually succeeded her uncle. None of his children survived to adulthood. So Victoria is the one who started Torchwood. That is the one. One of the reasons she has such an influence on Britain is, first of all, she was queen when Britain was absolutely dominant, just at the height of its game, at the top of its powers in the 1800s. Although it was already approaching that level when she, at the age of 18, became queen. Her uncle, who was King William IV, died in 1837, and she immediately inherits the throne. She's really the only one who can. And the fact that, let's face it, she owned and operated 2 X chromosomes and still got to be the ruler of Britain gives you an indication that they were fast running out of royals. So she inherits the throne early. Oh, Lord, we're being raided. I was not trained for this. Hi, Keto. Hi, Raiders. Hope you like history, because that's what you got for a while. And I've been completely thrown off my game. But when she comes to power, there is this assumption, and you have to understand, at this point, the kings and queens of Britain were already losing a lot of the traditional royal power to an elected parliament. William IV was hardly an absolute king himself. Even King George III during the American Revolution really was more of a figurehead than an actual ruler. The prime ministers were the ones who ran the show there. So, yeah, I know, first raid. I'm so excited. Oh, God, what do I do? So, it's like having our own Blathers, they said. Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate. I do my best. So you're getting a version of what my students get. So when Queen Victoria becomes queen, her job is, as they put it, to reign but not to rule. She doesn't have the authority to really decide on policy. Now, there were parties and politicians that she preferred over others. But more to the point, she was supposed to sit there and be a good example of the country. She was supposed to sit there and essentially model what it was to be British. And that she did particularly well. Yeah, Lainey, you're absolutely right. You know, the Hamilton musical actually did a very good job of illuminating that. Parliament was basically running the show. Now, the thing is, unlike her two uncles, George IV and William IV, she actually set a pretty good example for the standards of the time as to what a monarch was supposed to be. George IV was okay. William IV, hey, Emily, overindulged his appetites, whether that was for food, for, how do I put this nicely, intimate company, whatever it might have been. He always went above and beyond in a way that wasn't always considered becoming of a ruler. Mia, let's see. Oh, by the way, if anyone has a question, I don't care if I'm mid-sentence, shout it out, because I am here mainly to answer questions. So I've honestly not understood the monarchy. Like, I get they do not get to rule, but what is their job? Okay. This goes back a while. Monarchs used to be the big shots in every country, the absolute rulers who ran everything. But you have to go back thousands of years for that. Or at the very least, about 6 or 7 centuries. During the Persian Empire, the Persian king, his title was Shah, literally king of kings, ruler of the world. And there were still some absolute monarchs, in other words, kings and emperors and tsars and whatever your title might be, in which they could, whatever they said went for law and ruled the country. That absolutely existed at the time. In fact, in Europe, when Victoria is crowned in 1837, the Tsar of Russia was still an absolute ruler. He essentially owned the country and everyone and everything in it. Different societies had different justifications for this, but we as humans, we tend to like hierarchy. Thank you, Piglet. We like knowing who's in charge. And so monarchy grew out of that. Now in Britain, this had been a very long and gradual process of monarchs sort of gradually ceding power to different groups in order to govern their country. By the time we get to Victoria in the, let's say mid 1800s, That process was pretty far gone. These rulers didn't have a lot of authority, at least in Britain. France would ping pong through most of this time period between monarchy and a republic, and then a monarchy, and then a republic, and then briefly an empire, and then back to a republic. Say what you will, but nobody throws a revolution like the French. They are the absolute best at it. So Victoria did an amazing job at her main role, which was to be a symbol for the country and essentially put Britain's best foot forward. Almost in a form of diplomacy, both as an example to the people of this is how you should act. Let's be honest, the rich like to do that, even though they're not always the best characters of judgment themselves. And so to be a model to her people, but also to be an example to other countries of what Britain stood for. And in that, she was spectacular. And she would eventually go on to marry, and here we have a new photo, one of the great loves of her life, in fact, the love of her life, Prince Albert. Now, you may have heard some rumors about this. So I'm going to have to confirm one thing right now. Yes, Albert was her cousin. And today that is absolutely on the, and I'm going to use a technical term here, no bueno list. But remember, back then, royals could only marry other royals. So you're not talking about a dating pool. You're talking about a dating puddle. There's only so many European royals out there, and not even all of them had high enough status to marry the Queen of England. So she had maybe a baker's dozen of options, maximum. So the good news is that she and Albert got along famously. And in fact, if you read her love letters to Albert, they are really, at least by the standards of the time, pretty darn steamy. Now, granted, they're steamy by the standards of the 1840s, but we'll still take it. Oh my goodness, Carolyn just gave us a super chat. Thank you. Yeah, they're the pom-poms. So, I mean, the good news is that Victoria and Albert did genuinely seem, oh, wait, wrong photo, they actually did seem to have affection, which was pretty rare for royals at that time. A marriage for royals was a lot more like a business arrangement. And by the way, that is why never, ever should you ever give people the advice, make sure you treat your daughter like a princess. You do not want to marry her to the Austrian emperor for a peace treaty. Don't do that. And in fact, that's actually one of the things that is part of the tragedy of Marie Antoinette, but that's a story for another time. And so Victoria and Albert had a number of children because your number one responsibility when you're a ruler and you get married is to produce at least one heir, ideally two in case something happens to kid number one. Or as I like to tell my students, you want an heir and a spare. And in this instance, both Victoria and Albert did just that. And now we are going to start to get into the why everything is Victoria's fault. By the way, Tals, you're absolutely right. Actually, George Martin openly modeled his story. He pretty much says it much on the War of the Roses in medieval England. So you're not far off. Okay, I will do the Marie Antoinette next time. Louis and Marie will be next time. Thank you, Mindy. We got a chat. Thank you, Mindy. I appreciate that because I may look just like I'm relaxing and talking about my favorite subject. You're not seeing the cartwheels my stomach was doing when I sat down. So, the eldest child, the eldest son of these two, was obviously named after his father, Albert, officially Albert Edward. That's a very British name. Prince Albert, or as he became to be known around the family, Bertie. And bear in mind, the British royal family freaking loved nicknames for each other. They constantly nicknamed each other little things, this and that, even their in-laws. And so this photo here is from, I'm going to see if I can zoom in. Oh, there we go. So here, over here, we have Crown Prince Albert, or Bertie, on his wedding day. And there is Mumsy Victoria. Now, you'll say, for a wedding picture, she doesn't look too happy. And you would be correct. Victoria, half of them were named George. I mean, actually, the current eventual heir, William's eldest son, is named George. So, yeah, you got William, Edward, Albert, Charles, and those are like the big four. Not a lot of names. And by the way, Bertie, when he became king, would be King Edward VII. So even he picked a traditional name. But the big problem with monarchies is that whoever's next in line, you're at the mercy of two things. On the one hand, you're at the mercy of the roll of the genetic dice. Will you get someone competent or not? But more importantly, you're also at the whim of their upbringing. Because as we know now today in the 21st century, if you are not raised conscientiously by parents, there is a lot of therapy in your future if you want to be a functional human being. And there was no therapy back then. And there's really no nice way for me to put this. I'm just going to have to be blunt. Victoria was not a great parent. She was not a good mother. Now, look, a lot of royals were not great at parenting. But Victoria sort of set a new bar for being absolutely horrible. Mia, was there a question? There could be a question. If there is a question, let me know. Now, part of the reason that there was a lot of tension between mother and son deals directly with the relationship between Bertie and his father, Prince Albert. Oh, Mia, I know Victoria was not her real name, so why did they change their names when they became king or queen? Okay. Generally, this is how, first of all, royals have an enormous number of given names. We're used to, a given name, middle name, surname. They've got given name, another given name, another given name, another given name, because they've got so many ancestors. But the other thing is, once they are no longer the heir and actually are crowned the ruler, they get to pick what is called a reign name, or the royal name. Now, Elizabeth II, the previous Queen of England, who just died a few years ago, and Charles, they both kept their given names, and William will too. So when he becomes king, he'll be King William V. But frequently, you would pick something, again, from that very limited pool of names because it's tradition. A good example of this, pardon me, in Japan, for example, we know that the guy who was emperor of Japan during World War II was named Hirohito. Hirohito was his given name. But when he became emperor, he was officially known as the Showa emperor. Showa was the reign name, or the imperial name. And so it was all considered, from that point on, he was known to his subjects as the Emperor Showa. In the same way, Albert Edward, who was the crown prince, Bertie, when he became king, look, you're not going to have a King Bertie. And so he chose, and it's very telling, that he chose to be known by his middle name, Edward, and not his father's name, Albert. Albert and his son, Bertie, had at best a complex relationship, in part because Albert was absolutely convinced that his role as the prince consort, that's his official name, he's never going to be king, his role was to ensure that Victoria was presented in the best light possible in all things. We're at an ad, by the way. Does that mean I stop for a while, or okay, or do I just keep going? Okay, I'll keep going. Hold on, I've never done this before, so I've got my Q&A behind me. Darling?
No, I was just going to ask, do they change their names kind of like popes do? I mean...
Oh, so the question from Jam was, do rulers change their names like popes do? It's a very similar thing, except no pope goes by their given name. They always take ecclesiastical names. So, for example, the current pope was not born Leo, but Leo is an ecclesiastical name, so he's Leo the 14th. Excuse me. Hello, Dawn. Welcome. Thank you, Carolyn. I couldn't do it without the mods. So, in that case, so Albert is absolutely determined to make sure nothing makes Victoria look bad, nothing makes the kingdom look bad. And I don't know how many of you have had children. And I don't know how many of those children were teenage boys. I, once upon a time, was a teenage boy. And I will be the first, now granted, this was many, many years ago, back in the 20th century, or as my daughter likes to say, back in the late 1900s. Thanks for that. But I'll be the first to admit, I was not the paragon of great decision-making at all times. Bertie was no different. All young royals at one point, especially if they're men, have to do a stint in the army. Yes, Lainey, you're absolutely correct. Piglet got her heir and a spare and was finished. That's wise. So he was in the army, and again, not to shatter any illusions, but young men who are, for the first time, with a bunch of other young men and away from their parents, and let's just say there is some recreation going on. And furthermore, all right, short version is Bertie had a romantic dalliance with a commoner. Gasp, shock. That said, there was the risk that this could get out into the press. Remember, Britain's got a free press at this point, and that has only gotten even more free ever since. And Albert went down to where his unit was stationed to essentially give his son a proper father-son talking to. Essentially to explain to Bertie how thoroughly disappointed that he and his mother were, and that he had to have higher standards, etc., etc., etc. And by the way, Lainey, I'm with you. Jenna Coleman was fantastic in Doctor Who, although I actually really liked her interaction with Peter Capaldi as well. Now, when he went down to visit his son, to get down there quickly, he went by horse. Remember, this is the pre-automobile era, and carriages were much slower. He went by horse. It was one of those, sort of crisp evenings. He goes there. He basically reads us on the riot act for a couple hours and then rides home. Well, it started to rain on the way home, so by the time he gets back to Buckingham, He's cold and he's wet and he's been this way for a couple hours. Not shockingly, Albert comes down with a cold. And that cold becomes influenza. And that influenza becomes bronchitis. And it gets worse and worse. And then eventually Albert comes down with an acute and incurable case of death. And Albert passes away. I don't remember the date off the top of my head. I believe it was 1858, but don't quote me on that. Somewhere in there. And Victoria was absolutely devastated, just bereft. The one person she had actually shown actual affection to and deep affection in her entire life had never been her children. She even wrote she did not like being a mother. She did not like children. She especially did not like babies. She at one point described infants to her daughter as she was pregnant, that even the most adorable baby looks something like a mutated frog or something like that. And Mia, you are 1861. Okay, that's good. I was only about 3 years off. Huh. I know you will find this hard to believe. I don't have every single date in history memorized, unfortunately. Thank you, Piglet. But Mia, you're absolutely right. She blamed Bertie for killing Albert. Not because of the ride back and forth. That was Albert's choice. No. She was convinced that he had so shamed his father that Albert had died of shame and a broken heart, and it was all Bertie's fault. And how dare he? So I'm going to go back to Bertie's wedding photo. Again, let's zoom in on Mumsy here. She looks thrilled, doesn't she? Yeah. She would openly criticize Bertie in front of the court, in front of lawmakers, apparently not caring what the image was. Nothing he did was ever good enough. She would constantly chide him for being a disappointment. And even when he, lived up to her expectations, all he would get from his mother was a very well. That's it. Victoria would wear black in mourning. She looks like me when I have to deal with my husband when he... I'm very sorry to hear that, Mia. She would wear black mourning. Obviously, the tradition was for a year or two after the death of one spouse, she wore nothing but black the rest of her life after Albert's death in 1861. And she lived another 40 years. She died in 1901. She is the second longest reigning monarch of Great Britain, really going all the way. The only queen who ruler who ruled longer than Queen Victoria was Queen Elizabeth II. Lainey asked, is this where the whole "we are not amused" thing started? I'd love to say yes, but she was kind of always that way to everyone except Albert. Part of it was she was deeply ashamed of her uncle, the former King William IV, and therefore, she expected everyone to be prudish and proper at all times, except for her when she was with Albert, because hypocrisy. But this means that Bertie had a really, really, really hard time. To the point where, remember, with Albert, she lived a long time. And given the state of state of medicine in the 1800s, that's pretty remarkable. Hey, Bertree, Piglet, you're absolutely right. Part of the reason that she was such a horrible parent is that she herself had horrible parents. It doesn't excuse it, but it sure as heck explains it. So, and let's be honest. And by the way, I want to apologize for the coughing. I had the flu about a month ago, and unfortunately, just periodically, this cough sneaks up on me. So, the problem is, after Albert died, remember, Bertie is an adult. He is the heir. Okay? He's married. He's going to have kids of his own. At some point, he has to be trained how to be a ruler. You know, you need some on-the-job training. This is the most family business you will ever see anywhere. Oh, Mia, thank you. And Lainey, I'm sorry to hear that. I feel you. So, but she steadfastly refused. I don't know what the plan was, whether she was going to live forever, whatever. I don't think there was a plan. I just think, unfortunately, at this point, she just thoroughly detested her own son. To the point where in the 1880s, and by the 1880s, Bertie's in his 40s. I mean, we're not talking a young man anymore. At one point, Prime Minister Disraeli was going about his business. His secretary was with him, and he held up a key. And this was a key that unlocked a strong box in Parliament, or not in Parliament, but in the Prime Minister's residence. And he explained that this was a key for the most sensitive diplomatic dispatches. That the Queen's household had a key, and he had a key. And then he paused, he looked at his secretary and said, the Prince of Wales is not permitted to have one. So quite literally, his mother froze him out, he being Bertie, of any official duties. His first experience in being king honestly came when his mother died in 1901. Given his total lack of training, he actually did a decent job. But there was absolute enmity, just this deep-seated, I hate to say it, resentment, bordering on hatred between Victoria and her son. So that's bad enough. By the way, this is Bertie about the time this is after he got married. This is by the 1880s. It's been 20 years since his father died, and still his mother does not forgive him. Now, if Edward VII, Bertie, had been, Lainey, you're correct, had been ruled for a long time or had ruled during really consequential events, this would have been very different. Unfortunately, look, by the time he becomes king, he's in his 60s. He only is king for a little more than a decade before he dies of old age. So why is everything Victoria's fault? We didn't talk about the rest of the family. Because Victoria was the matriarch of one of the most, and I mean this, how do I put this? I'm trying to be diplomatic here. One of the most interesting families I've ever seen. So here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. We have an extended family portrait. Whoa. I cannot go any more than that, so you're just going to have to. So here we have Victoria in the center, looking as cheerful as ever. This photo was taken in the 1890s. So, over here is Bertie. This is the Prince of Wales. This is the future King of England. And these are all the royal relations. I want to draw your attention to a few faces. Face number one in all this. Now, by the way, by this point, Bertie had had a son who would succeed him, the future King George V. But there are a couple faces I want to show you. First of all, I want to draw your attention to this seated gentleman over here, the one with the mustache waxed up. That is Victoria's eldest grandson, William. But you have probably never heard him use the name William because he went by the version of William in his native country. Victoria's eldest daughter, nicknamed Alex, was married off to Crown Prince Friedrich of the German Empire. Their son, William, was known as Wilhelm. This would be the Crown Prince Wilhelm, who, I would like to point out, in 1888, excuse me, his father, who, by the way, the British royals loved. Friedrich was beloved by the English royal family. They nicknamed him Fritz. He fit in very well. Unfortunately, like many men at the time, he smoked a lot, got a terrible case of cancer in his throat and jaw, and would die after less than a year on the throne, which means Wilhelm in 1888 becomes the new emperor of Germany. The German title for emperor is Kaiser, which is the German word for Caesar. He becomes Kaiser Wilhelm II. He would be the ruler of Germany when the First World War breaks out. But remember, Victoria's his grandmother, which makes Bertie his uncle, which means Bertie's son George is Wilhelm's first cousin. When World War I breaks out, George is King George V of England, of Britain. And Britain and Germany go to war against each other. And that's not the only thing. Here we have another one of Victoria's grandchildren. Another German, Alexandra. Some of you may know this name because she would eventually, because she's a princess, she would marry the crown prince of Russia, right next door, Nicholas. In 1894, Nicholas's father, Alexander, dies. Nicholas becomes Tsar Nicholas II, and Alexandra becomes Tsarina Alexandra. They are the rulers of Russia during World War I. Mia, you're absolutely right. So this is, and by the way, Nicholas over here, now again, good thing, Nicholas and Alexandra genuinely loved each other. It's, again, that's rare. And they were actually pretty good parents, equally rare. They would have 5 children, and Shinan has already asked the question, did Princess Anastasia escape? Do you really want me to give you spoilers? The reality, sadly, no, she did not. None of the royal children lived. None of them survived the revolution. So, oh, Mia, you're right. She did have a daughter nicknamed Alex. This was Alexandra, the one who would marry the Russian prince, was the child of another one of Victoria's children. And Piglet, you're absolutely right. This is why Victoria was called the grandmother of Europe. That was almost in the most literal sense of the term. So bear in mind, the Kaiser of Germany, the Tsar of Russia, and the King of England in 1914 were all first cousins. Hold on, let me show you. See? Here we got Britain, here we got Germany, here we got Russia. Is the conspiracy theory real? Sadly, no, it is not. Yeah, again, royals, the problem is, don't feel bad, Mia. These royals repeat names constantly. Why do you think we have to number them? It's the only way we keep them straight. And if you're thinking, wow, this is a complicated family, Think about right before World War I breaks out. You think your family get-togethers are awkward? Think about this. And so in Victoria would, in it, completely unknown to her, would give Tsar Nicholas and Tsarina Alexandra a different wedding present. In some ways, the worst kind ever. I mentioned that the two of them had 5 children. The first 3 were daughters. Now, granted, I did study Russian history, so yes, I do know their names. They were Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. OTMA. So they went by sort of the acronym OTMA. Just the 4 girls that were thick as thieves. Until on the 5th try, they had a son. Because by Russia, you want the eldest son. Remember, heir and a spare. And this was the heir, what was known as the Tsarevich. And his name was Alexei. In Britain, they refer to him as Alexis, but in Russian, it's Alexei. Alexei inherited something from great-grandma Victoria. And it was a congenital medical condition. Because Victoria was a carrier for hemophilia. The blood condition in which the blood has a very hard time clotting, which means any cut, any bruise could be absolutely fatal and deeply painful to the young Tsarevich. And it's carried on the it's activated with the Y chromosome. So, thank you, Piglet. You're absolutely correct. And so, unfortunately, because he is directly related to Victoria, the Tsarevich, Alexei, I'm going to go back to my map, was a hemophiliac. And therefore, he couldn't run and play like other boys because any fall, any spill could potentially be life-threatening. And his parents, who, I will say this, at least Nicholas and Alexandra were better parents than Victoria was. Low bar, but at least there's that. But they were deeply, deeply concerned. And they were trying anything to cure their son, but they also didn't want the public to know their son was A, sick, and B, never going to get better. So they kept it a secret. And they're casting around for some solution. And that is when someone in Russia recommended this wandering holy man, this Orthodox priest who supposedly had enormous healing powers. He was from Siberia, which, I got to go back to my map. Bear in mind. Okay, so this is the Russian Empire. Siberia is everything not shown on this that goes all the way to practically Japan. Anyone want to, oh, I don't know. I'm highlighting. I'm Susan, Jam, I hit a button. Okay, never mind. I got it. Okay.
Well, they know my name now.
Oh, they knew your name already. Whoops. Does anyone, and if you want to know, the name of that holy man was Grigory Rasputin. And so, had it not been for Victoria, there would have never have been a need to even get this weirdo Rasputin involved in the Russian royal family. So those are the things that, oh yes, Carol and I hit all the buttons. So those are the things Victoria is personally directly responsible for. And you could probably draw a straight-ish line from Queen Victoria being an abusive mother to the First World War that pitted Germany against Britain and Russia at the same time. So that's what Victoria is directly responsible for. What was her government responsible for? Now listen, the British Empire, British Empire funded a lot of research. There were enormous scientific innovations done. Not taking any of that away from them. However, The number one thing Britain is responsible for that we are still feeling the effects of today, I'm going to show you a different map. This is a map of the world. Everything in red was conquered by Great Britain and part of their empire. And if you notice, you've got a full quarter of the Earth's surface directly under the rule of Queen Victoria. The reason they said that the sun never set on the British Empire is because when it was midnight in Britain, the sun was coming up over here in Australia and New Zealand. Literally, the sun was always shining somewhere on the British Empire. Oh yes, Piglet, this is the legacy of imperialism. But please note, between India, well, what was then called India, today modern Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Burma, or Myanmar, Malaysia, and also a full third of Africa, including Nigeria, which I believe has the highest population of any country in Africa. Mia, you're absolutely correct. This is during Victoria's lifetime. Not only did Victoria's Britain rule a quarter of the Earth's surface, it ruled 1 out of every 5 human beings on Earth. And by the way, also Egypt. Oh, and this little territory here that back then called Mesopotamia. Today we call it Iraq. Thank God that hasn't been in the news at all. And you have to remember not just that they took over all these countries, but between Britain and France, I want to focus on Africa for a moment, because, how do I put this nicely? If you were to rank all countries, 18 of the 20 poorest countries in the world today are on the continent of Africa, which is, by the way, the second largest continent in the world. And you may say, why are so many African countries so poor, so dysfunctional? Not all of them, but a lot of them. Here is why. And I'm going to have to go back a little bit, but I want to show you something. This is London during the Victorian period. London's population was exploding during the Industrial Revolution. We were building, long live New France. Vive le Canada. To give you an idea, London hit a population of 1 million in the 1840s. The last European city before that to have a population of 1 million was Rome at the height of the Roman Empire in the year 70 CE. It had been almost 18 centuries since Europe had a city with 1 million people in it. These machines were inventing new devices. They were allowing more food. But that also means you were getting a lot of people. And pollution was beginning to become a problem. Remember, in the 1840s, we had only just figured out that germs cause disease. We had never known that before. It is only now that people are realizing, oh, there are these microscopic organisms that can make you sick. Which is why in 1848, Britain had to very, 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 very quickly build the first modern sewer system. Because up until now, Europeans hadn't figured it out. And I'm sorry if I'm going to be very polite with this, but we are talking about the history of disease. You really need to keep your drinking water away from your pooping water, in the words of C.G.P. Gray. Hello, hello. And so cholera was a major issue. But the good news is that industry allowed more people to survive, more children to survive, more women to survive childbirth. The problem is these machines required resources to run that don't exist in England. England had coal and iron, absolutely had that. But here's the problem. England did not have rubber. Rubber only grows in the tropics, and rubber is absolutely essential to keeping these machines working. So is palm oil. Now, I don't mean petroleum, though eventually they would need that. I mean literally the oil from palm trees, coconuts, hazelnuts, etc., etc. That the oil from those nuts was used as a lubricant. The problem is the only places that those were available were in the areas along the equator. Oh, and by the way, Africa also has enormous reserves of gold and diamonds. And then, especially in Nigeria, oil. Piglet has a degree in history and in political science. See, after my own heart. And so, therefore, Britain needs these resources to keep its own machines running. Now, you would say, why not buy them? Yes, that would be the responsible thing to do. But if you really want to save money, and remember, Britain was the first to industrialize, so they were the first ones to get industrial weapons. They had military weapons no one else had. So, yeah, you could buy them. Or you could just take over and take the stuff for free. You don't get any points for guessing what Britain did. But what this also means is all the other European countries, like France, for example, well, if the British are going to have this advantage, well, the French are absolutely going to need them. And wherever France is, you know that other countries are going to want it. And they quickly began expanding into Africa. And there was a risk as Britain grabbed this and France grabbed that and Belgium grabbed their little bit and Portugal is holding on to what it's got, that these European countries might accidentally bump into each other and accidentally start a world war in the 1880s. So they decided that they would solve the situation, resolve the problem like civilized people. And you may be thinking, oh, you mean sit down internationally with the African people and come up with mutual trade agreements? No. They got together in the city of Berlin in 1885, whipped out a map, and started drawing lines. They started drawing lines over which territories belonged to whom. And so, on this map, everything in blue belongs to France, and everything in red belongs to Britain, and everything in purple was given to Germany, and Italy got these green areas, and Spain's got, these little bits over here, and Portugal still has these, but in essence, they divvied up the entire continent. There were only two countries that escaped. The first was Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is way up in the East African mountains and darn near impossible to invade. So they were sitting there with the geographic advantage that Mother Earth provided. And the other one is an interesting country, Liberia. Liberia had an interesting friend, and I do mean friend. It was the United States. Liberia was founded in the 1820s by American abolitionists who had raised money, and they had this wonderful humanitarian idea that they were steadfastly opposed to the African human trafficking business, the slave trade. So what they would do is they would buy enslaved Africans when they arrived in the Americas, and they purchased this territory in Africa. And then they would give them some, equipment and money and clothing and send them back so they could live in a protected, free country named Liberia, after liberty. And we know it's in the 1820s because the capital of Liberia today is Monrovia, named after President James Monroe. If you really want to have fun, go ahead and Google the flag of Liberia. It'll look kind of familiar. So Liberia had a treaty with the United States, so it remained unaffected. But Bertree, you're absolutely right. Africa got bulldozed, essentially by the Europeans that fell on it like vultures. And the sad thing is that isn't even the worst of it, because these lines they drew on the map would become, after World War II, when Europe had to evacuate Africa and the UN was in okay, you can't colonize people anymore. It's bad. It's wrong. No more. When these countries get their independence, they inherit the borders that were drawn by Europeans in 1885 in Berlin. And the problem is, some of these borders, I want to focus specifically here on Nigeria, modern Nigeria. Here is the problem. Britain drew those lines specifically to make sure, and remember, this is while Victoria's queen. This is why everything's Victoria's fault. Specifically to include 3 different ethnic groups that had a long history of absolutely hating one another. And by the way, to give you an idea of scale, Nigeria is roughly the size of Spain. This is not a tiny country. But that means when the British left and Nigeria became independent, it had 3 major ethnic groups that had a long history of cultural conflict and hatred. And they didn't even share the same religion. One of them was Christian, the other 2 were Muslim, crammed together in a country with a lot of oil. And people wonder why the country had a history of instability. Well, why was Victoria a bad parent? Her parents were bad parents. Why was Nigeria a struggle to become a stable country? Britain did not really give it the tools to be stable from the beginning. And here's the thing, Britain and France weren't the worst ones. If you want the worst one, warning, if you read up on the Belgian Congo, you may not sleep real well for a long time. Belgium owned the Congo here in Central Africa, what is today the modern Democratic Republic of Congo. So, and by the way, one of the lasting legacies here is that all the Congolese, to say nothing of everyone in this western chunk of Africa, the one language they all speak in common is French. Just like British English is prevalent in all the areas that Britain maintained. But in Congo, it wasn't owned by Belgium. It was actually owned entirely as the private rubber plantation of King Leopold II himself. Leopold owned a plantation 34 times bigger than the country he ruled. And he ruled Congo with such brutality that the British condemned him for being too racist in 1890. Oh Lord, like how horrible do you have to treat colonized people for the British to step back and say, you're going a little too far? You get the idea. And so this is Africa, but Africa is not the only place we're talking about. So the last map I'm going to show you is... Oh, Keto, you did come in at the wrong time. I'm going to show you a map. Every country in green at one point was colonized by a European country. Every country in purple counts as a European country. Every country in this sort of teal was had part of its territory controlled by a European. So we've only got a handful of countries that were able to keep their independence. And even some of those were iffy. Persia, now Iran, was never controlled by a European power, but it basically was dominated by one. Afghanistan was created by a treaty between Russia and Britain because Russia was expanding here into Central Asia and Britain had, India, and they wanted to keep the two apart. So they literally made Afghanistan with this little teeny tiny panhandle here to keep the two apart. Oh, Bertree, you have Star Trek art. You're already one of my best friends. That's amazing. I would love to see some. So yeah, the only countries that were never ever colonized, not once by the Europeans, we discussed Liberia, Thailand, at one point called Siam, Korea, and Japan. And even Korea deserves an asterisk because the only reason it wasn't colonized by Europeans is because it had already been conquered and colonized by Japan. So, yeah, virtually every country in the world has had either been owned outright by Europeans or been heavily influenced by them. And that craze started under Queen Victoria. And so that, my dear friends, in 1 hour, and I almost hit that right on the bell, is why everything is Victoria's fault. So, and I'm hesitant to say this, any questions? I know, Lord knows I'm going to have plenty. But, yeah. Oh, and Heidi, you had mentioned back on this other map how most of these countries are very small. Again, those borders were drawn that way, deliberately. So, let's see. Did I miss anything? I did not. Okay, good. Well, if there are no other questions or comments, thank you for your patience. This was a lot of fun. It's a little weird for me to try to do this. I normally ask questions during a class like this, and I can't see anyone's faces, but we will deal. Oh, Mishu, that's why you speak French in a country that mostly speaks English. Well, absolutely. Remember, 1754, I think I got that date right. But during what they called the 7 Years' War, what we on the continent of North America call the French and Indian War, that's when Britain stormed the Plains of Abraham and conquered Quebec, the capital of New France. So yeah. Oh, thank you, Mishu. Oh my Lord, Mishu super chatted us like crazy. Like, oh my God, it's huge.
Like, oh my God?
Like, oh my God.
Yay!
Oh, and by the way, Mishu, you may...
Because we love Mr. Jam.
Thank you. Oh, and you're more than welcome, Carolyn and Kat. I had a good time. I would also like to, Mishu, you're going to appreciate this. Not only did I do research for my dissertation at the National Archives of Canada in Ottawa, my dissertation is on the Canadian West and the Northwest Mounted Police. So I've been to Canada a couple times, and it is one of my absolute favorite places to be. I love the one true North. So, oh, thank you, Mia. Yeah, a lot of us had really bad history teachers. That's kind of why I decided to become one. Someone had to get it right. But I appreciate this. So, and yes, Jam and her pom-poms are fantastic. Unfortunately, now I am going to...
Don't talk about my pom-poms on stream. Oh, sorry, my pom-poms. That
was her, not me. I was as innocent as a newborn babe. So next time, you guys want me to do the French Revolution, huh? Okay, all right, okay. I will warn you, there is an appalling amount of guillotining going on, but I will happily do that. However, at this point, I'm going to have to relinquish the big chair because you have some DDV ahead of you.
They're probably like, how about nah?
So, my duck comes out nice and... I will say this: her duck does come out nice and suck. I mean, it's master poultry.
It's true.
Oh no, Bertree had to do that. Well, I tell you what, there is a Mr. Jam channel on Discord. So I tell you what, if you go to the Mr. Jam channel, give me some ideas for topics for next time, and then I will make a poll, and then we will do that. Fair enough? Okay. Oh, Jam.
Hold on.
Okay.
Pocopia's got to go to sleep.
Okay. Bertree's begging for not the French Revolution. I tell you what, if I don't do the French Revolution, I will do a little side bit on Marie Antoinette, who actually never did say, let the meat cake. Thank you, Carolyn. I miss you, my dear friend. So, alrighty. So I can't even. Pocopia. Oh, listen, it was actually my pleasure. I do love talking about this stuff. So, Pocopia has gone to sleep. DDV is...
sort of getting ready.
Getting ready.
I said sort of getting ready.
So, let's see. Why do you think Japan and the other countries who evaded control were successful? Oh, God. Okay, well, you just bought yourself 5 minutes. So
Go slow.
Go slowly. Okay. So... no one should ever have to speak French to learn about the French Revolution. That's sadistic. Okay, Keto. The countries that were able to avoid being colonized did so for wildly different reasons. Liberia had been established as a safe haven for emancipated slaves by American abolitionists. Thailand was able to escape by quite cleverly playing the Europeans off against each other. They were able to go to the British, say, well, you don't want the French to come in here and take us over. And then they would turn around to the French, like, well, you don't want those Brits taking us over. And therefore, we're able to sort of tread a very fine line. Although they did have to make a lot of concessions to both Britain and France to stay alive. And Japan was a completely different situation. Japan saw what Britain and France had done to China and were terrified. And so when the Americans showed up, they essentially adopted the old maxim, well, if you can't beat them, join them. And the Japanese did something remarkable. It was a period called the Meiji Restoration. And they honestly did something incredibly ambitious. They basically said, we are going to transform our country from a feudal 16th century agrarian state into a modern 19th century industrial constitutional monarchy, and we're going to do it in one generation. Holy crud. And by the way, I just saw that you're behind. So you will get an answer to your question. You're just going to have to wait however many minutes. So sorry. Okay, apparently Keto is way behind. So thank you, everyone.
He runs away.
Flee!
I think next time, though, this should be on Mr. Jam's channel.
It should, because that is coming.
It should be on Mr. Jam's channel. Keto said it was okay.
Thanks.
No. That you answered her.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, that's good. I thought she was like, it was all
right. It was all right. The talk was
okay.
Could you hand me my controller?
Of course.
That's what I forgot to grab.
The one that's plugged in.
Oh, my camera just went completely out of focus.
Plugged in or not plugged in?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know.
There you go.
Why is my camera all of a sudden not focusing? Hello. Hi, everybody.
You can get rid of Queen Victoria.
Yes, Mr. Jam's channel. Exactly. What is up with this camera? I have to let it refocus. Here, hold on. Okay, hopefully that'll reset it. My goodness. Sorry, Queen Victoria, but you got to go.
Don't apologize. She wasn't that nice of a person.
No, I know. I do know. Hi guys. What is going on? It's like once it gets out of focus, it doesn't want to refocus. Come on. Okay. It's just like it's a sensitive camera. I know it's not right. What is happening here? Hello?
Did you turn it off and on again?
Pokopia? No, we're not doing Pokopia. I want to do GDV, but for some reason it's not switching over. It's not switching over. What the heck? I was playing Pokopia. Exactly. I was personally playing Pokopia.
It's the red one.
Yeah. What the heck?
Did you try closing the camera thing and...
It's not the camera. It's the...
No, the blurriness is what I'm saying.
Oh, yes, I did.
Oh.
Pokopia reigns supreme. The whole system is just sad. Exactly. Everything's just like, oh, Jam, no. We're going to make it fuzzy. I know I'm blurry. Hold on. I got nothing. I don't know why it won't focus. Well, I don't want to have to restart the whole stream. That would be a pain in the butt cheeks.
Just the cheeks?
I'm troubleshooting, yes. No. You guys can hear me though, right? Audio's fine? Okay. Hi, Coco. Oh gosh, I don't know what's going on with it. Let's see. Yes, the camera's Logitech, sorry. I know, I'm a blurry jam jar. Whoa. I mean, normally it'll reset itself. Like I've done this before, like when I've showed something like really close to the camera and then it resets. But what the heck? I hope no one's drinking. Is anybody blinking like, oh God, is it me? Do I need to... What in the heckles? Okay. I might have to restart this. It's like goes in the camera, right? Oh my goodness. Okay. You think it's a sign to continue with history? The camera needs a Red Bull? Oh my gosh.